Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Get Checked In Event Strategies for 2024. My name is Camille Whitestern. I run experiential marketing here at Splash, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you to today's virtual discussion. Before we take our end of year PTO, let's just take a second to reflect on our 2023 event strategies and ask ourselves what worked and what areas need improvement in 2024. With the continuing resurgence of in-person events, an uptick in the required touch points along the buyer journey, and an increased need for data to inform your event programs, there's truly no shortage of lessons learned from this past year. So in a couple of minutes, I'll be joined by Annie Thompson, who's the Director of Experiential and Global Merchandise from Bumble, and Christine Swore, the Director of Events and Production at Lattice, to spill the tea on what they plan to bring into their event strategies next year and what they're leaving behind this year. I'm so excited and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Their career backgrounds are honestly so impressive. In fact, I'm going to share a little bit about them before they hit the stage so I can just brag a little bit about our speakers for a second. So as the Director of Events and Production at Lattice, Christine Swore leads the brand's global event strategy, in addition to a full production slate of podcast and video content. And prior to Lattice, she led the production studios at digital publishers Pop Sugar and Brit & Co., and began her career in television, where she casually won 2 daytime Emmys as a producer for Sony Pictures Television. And Annie Thompson has worked in experiential since 2010, supporting brands like Southwest Airlines, Verizon Wireless, and Toyota Scion. In 2012, she joined the launch team for Google's new disruptive fiber to the home product and stayed with the brand for 6 years, running the national events team. After leaving Google, she started her own small production group in Austin, where she worked with South by Southwest, Meta, T-Mobile, and several local festivals where she landed Bumble as her first client. And she's been making the first move with the Bumble team ever since and officially joined Bumble in-house in late 2020, where she oversees strategy and production for activations across the company, including she's built the Bumble IRL program and is now overseeing the merchandise team that supplies branded product supporting all Bumble Inc. apps, teams, and countries. It's pretty epic, okay? Annie and Christine are absolute rock stars. And today we're going to be talking about the biggest challenges we see on the horizon and diving deep into tactical solutions that we can use to face these challenges head on in the new year. Talking about from overcoming attrition and improving ROI all the way to aligning sales and marketing teams. Our experts have really been there, done that, and are graciously lending their time to us today to dish on some serious wisdom. So before we dive in really quickly, let's run through a few housekeeping items before we get to the good stuff, especially because I'm pretty sure we have some first-timers in the audience. If that is you today, welcome. Thank you for being here. So glad you've joined us. At Splash, we support marketers across the globe from the world's leading brands in their efforts to unlock event-led growth. And we're doing that by providing a tool that helps you simplify your processes, amplify your organization's brand, and measure your results in order to grow your business through everyday events at scale, whether they're in person, online, or hybrid. And if this isn't your first Splash webinar rodeo, then you know that Splash completely powers the end-to-end attendee journey for today's event. So this means the registration page that you RSVP'd on, all of the pre-event reminder emails you received, and the virtual experience in Splash Studio right now are all a part of Splash's all-in-one event marketing platform. So you can think of this as a real-time Splash Studio demo. You've already experienced Splash's registration and design capabilities just to get to this point. We hope you've loved it. And once this live event concludes, we will leverage Splash to host this event on demand. And that means whether or not you join us live, you'll get access to the on-demand recording, which is awesome. And if you're interested in learning more about the Splash platform, there are a few ways you can do that. You can sign up for a one-on-one tailored demo with our team. You can join a bi-weekly Meet Splash. It's a 30-minute product overview event, also hosted in Splash. Or you can sign up for a free account, jump on in and test the waters for yourself. Okay, now that you know a little bit about Splash, I want to make sure we're properly oriented with our interactive tools for today. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice we've got our chat, Q&A, some polls. We will be launching some polls throughout our discussion today, so be sure to vote on those. And if you have questions related to what we're covering today, please feel free to let us know and submit them through the Q&A tab, or you can drop them in the chat. Other attendees can upvote questions that you do submit through the Q&A tab, which is pretty neat, and it'll help us shape the main discussion for today. But fret not, we will leave time for additional Q&A at the end, so let us know your questions as we go. And let's not forget to utilize our chat. You'll see we've got a message pinned in there for you today, and we'll be dropping and pinning other messages. I want to shout out everyone who shared where they're tuning in from today. We've got folks from Toronto, New York, Vietnam, Austin, Kansas City. Love it. San Antonio, Texas. I've got one more chat prompt for you right now. We'll go with an easy one. What is your favorite movie to watch during the holidays? I will share mine. I would say I'm going to go with the classic. It's going to be Home Alone 2 for me. Yes, I'm a Home Alone 2 person. Die Hard. Love it. It's a classic. Okay, I want to know, what are your favorite holiday movies in the chat? The Holiday, yes, I agree. That's maybe number 2 for me. Christmas Story is a classic. Office Christmas Party. Okay, Danielle. Okay, I got to get into that. I love it. We've got Elf, another classic. Polar Express or The Grinch. Okay, this is great. I love it. Thank you for humoring me. I have just one final housekeeping item. I promise it's just a little bit more of an announcement, and our regulars in the audience know what is coming. I'm talking about our social raffle, our community raffle for today. So you could win a $50 Visa gift card to help you take care of this holiday season. It's one of our core values here at Splash, and we really like to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So here's how you can enter to win. We're going to drop a link into a LinkedIn post in the chat right now. You are going to like that post, and you're going to comment on it, and you're going to share what is your big bet, one of them or a few of them. What are some big bets that you're making on your event strategy in 2024? I want to know. Okay, we will announce the winner at the end of today's event, so stick around. So let's get to it, because the clock is ticking and we've got some wisdom to share with y'all today. I'm absolutely thrilled to bring up onto the stage Christine Swore and Annie Thompson. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hey, Annie. Hey, Christine. How are you?
Hello. Gosh, Camille, hype woman. We're going to take her on the road with us, I think.
Listen, maybe I need to start moonlighting as just let me do your intros for you. I love to hype people up, but also it's very warranted because you guys are epic.
Well, thank you. Excited to be here.
So pumped to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in. I want to make the most of our time. Christine, could you just, before we get into our actual discussion questions, share a little bit more about the types of events that you're running at Lattice? Anything you want to share too about, how what you're doing for the podcast and video content ties in with your event strategy, but just would love for you to paint a little bit more of a picture in terms of like what the work that you're doing today looks like.
Well, first of all, favorite holiday movie. I'm going to say it's a tie between Elf and I also love The Family Stone. Like it makes you cry, but like it's so good. Like,
it's a good cry.
So I'm Christine. I head up events and production at Lattice. If you don't know Lattice, we're in the HR space. So B2B software platform for people leaders. And as far as events and production, we do a lot of the traditional event buckets. So we have our digital events. We ran 38 digital events this year. We have our more typical field events. We do more intimate dinners and workshops for those more late stage prospects. And then we have a big annual conference we do every year called Resources for Humans that gets around 20 to 30,000 registrants And that's like our big tentpole event of the year. I'll talk more about how we may be changing it up later when we get through more of our plans. And then we also do brand activation. So for instance, this year we did pop-up trucks in a bunch of different locations where we're serving like coffee and donuts and just like big brand play, major delight. I do oversee our podcasts and video content, all those things. So we do a lot of just integrated campaigns. So if we engage with a speaker for a podcast, we also may pull them over for a webinar or bring them on for a live panel at an event. We just try to think really big with what is the content theme and then where are the different places that we can put our speakers.
Super smart. I love how you're thinking that way. And I got the email. We're Lattice customers also. So I got the email for the pop-up truck and I was like, oh, I'm not in New York City. I wish I was there.
It was so good.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you for sharing. Annie, would love to hear a little bit more from you about, the programs that you're running for Bumble and the work that you're doing today.
Absolutely. Really, I asked for the poll about the breakdown of B2B and B2C because we absolutely want to make this session work for you all. And obviously in my role at Bumble right now, I'm pretty strictly working in the B2C world. And it feels like we kind of have a 50-50 split. So hopefully there's something in here a little bit for everybody. But Bumble, if you're not familiar, is a social networking app started in dating. We have Bumble for Friends. So any sort of real connection that you're looking to make, we can help you do that online. You can use the app almost anywhere in the world. And my role specifically, I sit within our global marketing team. And we do any and everything. Events have been inherent to the success of Bumble since its inception. 2024 is our 10-year anniversary. Whitney started this app 10 years ago, which is sort of mind blowing. That we've all been using dating apps for 10 plus years, but our sort of brand story specifically, but whether it's as simple as hosting a bar tab on a college university up to a 10-day activation at South by, events are just in the fabric of what Bumble does, because ultimately it's about connections in person, whether that's a group of people coming together platonically, or one-to-one romantic matches, even if that's just casually dating or results in marriage and babies and all the things. So there's just this really crucial, I think, live component, though we're a tech company. So it's a really interesting, also dating can be really personal. It can be hard. It can be really exciting. It can be super emotional. So you have this tech product woven in with this highly personal, highly emotional journey. So we see people in a lot of phases of their life when we do stuff in person, and it's really fun. One of the most common things when we're out on the road, we're out doing a tour, we're running an event series, we get people that just come off the street that are like, I'm a Bumble success story. This is my wife, this is my husband, this is my girlfriend, my partner, whatever. And it's just really awesome to see. We've built this inclusive, awesome brand that people are proud to be a part of, to say that this is how they met. There's no oh yeah, we met at the grocery store. It's no, it's cool. We met on Bumble. So specific programs right now, Camille mentioned 2022 saw the launch of Bumble IRL. Oh my God, we love to see it. We've got success stories in the chat. We appreciate you. Give me your address. I'll send you something. Camille, Chelsea, help me out.
We'll make it happen. I love it.
But yeah, Bumble IRL kicked off. Like I said, we've done events in so many ways over time. We had never done a recurring sort of scalable program that users could count on, that every month they had a handful of things to do in multiple cities. It started in the US and we have grown into UK and Europe in some of our markets. But it's been a series of partnerships. It's this kind of cool, glorified perks program. But ultimately there are opportunities for people to get together, and meet like-minded folks. So 2022 saw 445 events across 10 US cities. This year, we're probably edging around 500 in 15 or 16 markets. And sort of as Christine said, more to come when we talk about plans for next year of the evolution of that. But then I additionally support larger sort of like one-off brand activations. I just got off the road from the Unwell tour. We were the presenting sponsor of Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy podcast tour that hit six or seven North American cities the month of November. I went to almost all of them. It was wild, but a fun activation there. I know maybe I'm slightly too old to be on the road with Call Her Daddy, but
I
we
love
leaned
it.
in.
I love it.
So yeah, we just actually did an activation for Bumble for Friends with Cameron Diaz and The Holiday. We did a showing of the movie, I think last Thursday in LA, and Cameron showed up and Nancy Meyer showed up, and like all of these Bumble for Friends women just like completely geeked out. So we try and do a little bit of everything, anything, all the time. And I am like, just by trade and nature, like I'm a road dog. I'm like, I want to be carrying boxes at 3 a.m. somewhere. So like, I'm here to just talk about all the wild things.
I love it. Thank you so much. That was a really great breakdown. And man, oh gosh, you both get to do so many cool things. Also, I was struck by similarities between what you were saying, Annie, and probably like how it is at Lattice, Christine. All of everything you were saying, Annie, about like, listen, like dating or even just like making friends, making connections is such a personal journey and experience, which events can play such a critical role in that journey, or, fostering those experiences. And then similarly, Christine, when I think about like, yes, Lattice is a like HR tool, but what does that really mean? It is, like you're fostering connections, obviously, between employees, managers, and direct reports, but also like to unlock career growth and like change people's lives, which is also like what you're doing at Bumble, Annie. So really, really cool for me to take a step back, and yes, very different businesses and organizations, but just cool to see the overlap in mission, in just like changing people's lives.
Also, Annie, if you want to like trade roles for a little bit, like I'll go on tour and do all those things.
Hey, I'm like, put me in your studio. I'm actually thinking about starting my own podcast next year. So like,
you need to, Annie.
Okay, we can swap.
You actually need to do that. Okay. Well, so I heard some things that from both of what you shared that I want to just like dive into the first real question. Can we unpack some of the biggest challenges that you faced in the last year, and or just like biggest learnings from what you have executed over the last year? My next kind of question, if you want to start thinking about it, or if you want to answer it all at once, is, what also was your biggest contributor to success? For me, I think very holistically. So if I'm going to think about challenges, I'm also like naturally also going to think about like, well, what worked well? What were the successes? So I'll kind of lob you two big questions first. You can unpack them if you want and talk about just the challenges and learnings, and then get into your successes. But I would love to start there, because I think that's how we will lead into my next question, which is like, what are you absolutely leaving behind? But again, let's start with the challenges and learnings first. Christine, I'll start with you. When you think about, if you had to name just one thing even that comes to mind, a challenge that you and your team have overcome in the programs that you've run this year, and achieving your goals, I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective there.
Yeah. So my role has really changed over the past year. So I've been at Lattice for a little over 3 years. And for most of my time, I've been executive producer of content and programming. So the podcasts, the videos, but also oversaw all the programming for events. So I was mainly focused on what's our content, what's the theme, who are our speakers. Like if we're filming stuff, I would film it. But just recently, over the past 6 months, have jumped in on fully running the events team and jumping in on shaping our strategy. So many challenges, so many learnings. But I think it's been interesting because I have to wear 2 hats now, right? So I've always worn the programming hat of like how to tell the best story, how do we get the message to the right audience? What do they want to hear? Who's the right person to give that story? But now really having to wear that hat of how do we actually like create events and experiences and touch points that are delivering business results. And there's been some challenges there of like having to like figure out both, but ultimately, and I think we've all witnessed this over the past year, like we really have to show results with what we're doing. It's much harder just to like, let's just do a big brand thing and like, let's see how it works. It's like, okay, really, what is our goal here and how is it impacting our overall company goals? But I realized I can wear both hats. They both actually go together. And, the programming can very much closely align with the goal of, okay, are we driving leads here? Who exactly are we trying to get in the room? And all of that, but just really making sure we're impacting the bottom line. So it's been, an interesting journey and definitely kind of working much more closely with sales than I ever have, which has been a really good thing. And changing up a lot of the roadmap, even for content outside of events where our podcasts fall in on the calendar and certain things like that are just making sure that everything is aligning to the overall sales calendar. So that's just, I think the biggest challenge for me is I'm in a totally new role and I've been just kind of figuring it out. And it's been a really, really good challenge. I think it's something that event leaders are always trying to figure out is the right balance of like the story and the brand messaging along with like really then what is the ROI that you're getting out of the events. On the flip side, as far as like kind of what have been the big wins and everything, I do think coming from that programming background, our content and what we've delivered this year, there's been like a few select events that just like knocked it out of the park. We got the right theme at the right time. Like a couple of digital events where like our registration was just through the roof because we hit that topic that our audience really needed to hear at that right time. We also went really into that deep level of like, show me how to do it instead of just like the really broad thought leadership. And then also on the speaker side, we tried something different over this past year. We started it's called the Chief People Officer Council. So Lattice's CPO Council, where we brought on a 10-person CPO cohort and basically like offered these CPOs, like, we'll give you access to the Lattice Thought Leadership brand. We'll help build your own individual thought leadership platforms. And we did like a kickoff where they had like a wine tasting event, like virtually with the 10 CPOs. But basically offer them like, what do you really care about? What themes are you most passionate about? We did like intake calls with them and got a lot of info from like, if they could do a podcast, what would they do? If they were going to host a webinar for us, what would they do? So we basically had a roster this year of just kick-ass, like amazing CPOs that we could have going for a webinar or an in-person panel or whatever it may be. We all know how hard it is to book speakers. It is not an easy job. So having that like dedicated panel of experts that we could go to for events was just great. And we were able to move a lot faster and also like build out our roadmap pretty far out, knowing who we had on board. And one more thing, as far as like a big win, very much went global this year. So we have a big EMEA presence. We have an EMEA team. In the past years, we've done like, okay, here's our North America webinar. And then we have our EMEA webinar. Here's our EMEA event. And then here's our North America event. We really tried to streamline and scale with our overall event plan. So we did a lot of global digital events. So we would do a webinar. We would have it live for North America times, but we would then rebroadcast it for EMEA times, add on an EMEA moderated Q&A, and just really built out a global roadmap of content. So the full team was able to do a lot more and get a lot more reach with that content. Same thing with in-person events. When we would create a program where we would host an event here that would also happen in EMEA. The pop-up trucks, they were in New York, they were in Chicago, they were also in London, and just building a much bigger global brand was a big win for us this year.
First of all, the speaker sourcing.
Yeah.
Oh,
A
yeah.
cohort. It was amazing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Was that so? Like the speaker cohort, I could, because my wheels are turning, and I'm like, oh, I could see other internal stakeholders seeing that and being like, oh, could we make it this? Could we make it that? Is it really just the speaker cohort, or because mine? I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds almost like that could be like the beginnings of like a cab or like customer advisory board or and then also it sounds like you're basically building your own like influencer marketing.
It's exactly that. So it's a blend of customers and non-customers, leaning a little more heavily on customers. And it is like thought leadership play. So they're not just doing like the webinar or the in-person event for us or like being on the podcast. They're doing a lot of article content for us and things like that. But it's a very broad thought leadership play with them. And then they do also it's very much we're trying to create their own kind of small community. So we host monthly office hours with them where they all get to like chat and like talk about what's top of mind for them. So we're starting small, but it's an amazing thing if you have the opportunity of like a more exclusive small group that you can create that you can tap for events like this. It's a big win.
I love it. I'm like gonna take this back to our team. This is a great idea. And then to your, just the other like kind of success of finding success through the repeatable, scalable event programs. Amen. I could preach about that all day. The big one-off events or like the big like tentpole annual events absolutely have a place in the event strategy. Annie, I'd love to I'm sure you have thoughts too on like the big tentpole, large flagship versus the more repeatable, scalable event programs. But when I think about what's worked for us as well, it's definitely been, and that's also why being able to prove the value and measure results is so key, is because then you can say, oh, this worked well. We did 2 or 3 dinners in these cities. Let's turn it into a real program that we scale across 15, 20, 25 cities. So Annie, I'm going to turn to you next and would love to get your thoughts in the mix here. Any similarities and challenges? I know you, didn't necessarily have maybe such a dramatic role change as Christine has experienced as of late, but I'm curious if you could pick out kind of your top challenges that you've had to work through and overcome, and some of your biggest contributors to success this year.
Yeah, I think we all feel definitely in the world of needing to make sure we're showing success and driving business impact. I think we'll probably talk about that in other ways too. So we're in that place, but I think for us is, and I hope that we're fully done saying this once we hit December 31st of this year, but it does still feel like there's a little bit of rebound post-COVID coming, or that we were experiencing this year, really just in attendee behavior, right? I think it's not quite as easy to anticipate than it was pre-pandemic of like what turnout will be, which this in turn makes optimizing for on-site a little bit harder when it's like, oh, that 20% attrition that we could all bank on, whether it was like a conference or a wedding or a this or that, is now, I mean, we see really wildly high attrition rates of it. What we're doing, everything is free. And it's like, are you exhausted? Are you like not wanting to do this? Does this Tuesday night just feel like you need to sit on the couch? I think we as like individuals are much more comfortable with doing that and sort of like opting out, coupled with this like kind of fear of a little bit of anxiety of like being back together, and less maybe now this year about like the germs of it all, but more about like, well, have I sort of like lost my groove? Like even me personally, I actually moved, I did 10 years down in Austin, Texas. I moved back home to Kansas City over this last year. I had a really hard time coming out of COVID. I was like, everything's different. Events, like my whole life changed. So I think we're still like coming out of that. And for us with the IRL program specifically, talking about that, like so much is dependent on that on-site experience, like as little as like the right ratio of like men to women, the right set, like the right size. It's really hard to make a connection with only like 25 people in a room, like, right. And so I think just really designing the program to be reactive and to fit the real need of the consumer when that consumer is a little bit harder to peg. So I think that's where most of the challenge sat this year.
Yeah.
But it's the exact sort of flip of that for the success contributor. There is a desire to be in person. I do think, even if it comes with anxiety or a little more like planning is required, I think it's really clear, like the sentiment is there. People want to be together. And I think that is 100% across the board in business, in personal, even if we've got some like ambivalence in what their like day of action is. But really, like, our driving factor is always connection, as I shared. So this like definitely aligns. So again, it's just, trying to put all those puzzle pieces together and put the best opportunity forward, I think, to make people comfortable and compelled to come spend time with you.
Yeah, I don't think that you're alone in feeling that way or thinking that way, Annie, or facing those challenges. I literally was just having a conversation. She might be in the audience, or maybe she'll tune in on demand. But I was just chatting with an event strategist and consultant, Tiffany English, and she was, saying pre-pandemic, she's like, yeah, I was the person going to like one event a day, like during the week, especially, maybe a few over the weekend. And now my behavior is totally different as an attendee. I'm much more selective. I'm much more like, maybe I'm doing 2 events a week, maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 a month. And so I think, I don't think that she is alone in behaving that way. And I can even say, my behavior has changed, like I moved from New York to Los Angeles. So I don't know as many events that are going on here that I would go to. Whereas in New York, I was like, oh yeah, I'll go to this event. I'm going to pop into this dinner. We'll go to this workshop, So I think that's a really good point. Just that attendee behaviors have changed, I think, because in general, buying and consumer behaviors have changed. So that's a really big one, that I'm sure a lot of people are, and you really kind of highlighted a lot of the kind of the domino effects of that, right? Attrition is like, it's a lot harder for a lot of event organizers to plan for that, and then, but on the flip side, you're right. People are like starved for this in-person connection. And I guess I would love a little bit of a tangential question, but would love to know if you've seen. I know, Christine, you do a fair amount of digital. Annie, I'm not sure as what like the digital. No, you're in person. Yeah, the digital is through the app, and then you bring people in person for the experiences. Duh. Well, Christine, I'd love to hear from you then, just really quick, on if you've seen, if you agree with this. I have, I'm not the only one, but I've been hearing and noticing and seeing firsthand the trends in like why people will attend virtual or a webinar event versus in person. And we even talked about it prepping for this conversation, right? I was like, I think people are going to come to this because they want to gain a new thought or idea or learn something new, or they want to affirm or confirm something that they've been thinking or kind of experimenting with or thinking about experimenting with, especially for virtual. And I think that like if the connection and community building happens in virtual, that is a nice cherry on top of the sundae. But I don't know that that's like why people are actually showing up today versus the in-person. I think now it's connection and community and networking above all else. But I'm curious to just get your thoughts on like, but the content still can't suck for in-person, right? So, and like the experience, right? So like, how are you, Christine, how are you thinking about content? But then Annie, I would love to hear you chime in like on just like experience design in general. Like, how are you thinking about, you mentioned, Christine, there were a few events that just really knocked it out of the park because you had like the right content, the right message, the right story for the right audience at the right time. So how are you kind of thinking about that for 2020, going into 2024?
Yeah, lots of thoughts happening literally right now as we build out our roadmap. I feel so strongly about the networking part of it. So like, I think we're all like wanting to get back in person in the right way. We host, so our big annual conference, RFH virtual, it has been virtual for the past, like since the pandemic for the past 3 or 4 years. We tested this year doing an after party in like major cities, like right. So the conference runs until like 3 p.m. PST. So we then had an after party in SF, an after party in New York, an after party in London. And those were like, we had no issues getting like fully meeting our attendance goals. It was all around networking. It was like we had like a couple like prompts of like, different things like what was your favorite part of the event, or come meet some of the speakers, because we invited some of the speakers from that conference to be there live at the happy hours. And those were just like fantastic. And it was like fully focused on networking, seeing people in person, getting to meet some of your peers, things like that. I have found on the content side with like what makes sense for in person, it has to have that networking component to it. Or on our end with a lot of our audience, it's like a really interactive like course, workshop, something in person where it makes sense for you to like, we'll have a half-hour panel, but then we want to do like an hour breakout in person of those things. So it was a good test for us this year to see how we could have that virtual conference followed up by an in-person activation. And we're even trying to build that out even more going into next year of like what that could look like. But any in-person content still has to be amazing, but you can't just have it be like a panel. Like you will literally have attendees be like, why wasn't this just a webinar? Like, why am I here? So we're always just trying to think of like, what is getting that person to say, like, think of ourselves, like what will get me out the door and want to go to that. And sometimes fly to that event experience and make it worthwhile. Because people are a lot more now like, that could have just been a webinar. I could have like watched that on demand. I didn't need to be there in person, unless you make it this really high impact experience for the attendees.
Yeah, I love that. Annie, I'm curious how you're thinking about, like, if you were to answer the question, like, how do you think about driving attendance? How do you think about event design or experience design in such a way that you're like, I know this will get people to show up? And what, I guess, like, if we want to weave in one of the questions I had planned to ask you is like, is there anything that you are ditching or leaving behind in 2023 in terms of like how you're approaching really impactful experience design?
Yeah, I think so many similarities to what Christine just shared. Like, it does need to be worth it, right? We've all gotten a bit more particular on the way that we're going to spend time, money, etc. I think trying to come up with ways to design for things that take care of pain points and or like facilitate things in our specific, like, how do we help facilitate a match in a way that, like, in person you don't have the digital barrier, so it's like a little less comfortable. I think it's a sort of like age old, like, man and woman are in a bar, man walks up to woman in bar, like it can be uncomfortable, right? So like, how do we make environments that it's like just super clear that the intention of everyone is the same walking into the room. So you're sort of like equalizing everyone, that it's like, this is a safe space to come and do that. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's like game is going to be great and that every person in that room is like what you're exactly looking for. So there's still such like a human element to it. But I think even just putting people, giving them an opportunity to come to a space where everyone's in theory intention is the same is like such a step in the right direction. And just getting you closer to that, whatever your end goal is, right? Like I said, doesn't have to be marriage. It could just be like, oh my God, this dog is literally ruining my slipper. All right. That's what's happening today. I knew something was going to happen on this call. Whether that's like, oh my God, you have a date to your Christmas, your, holiday, company holiday party that's this weekend, or something like really serious is brewing. I think just helping people like shuffle along the journey a little bit faster. Cause I think that's one of the pain points we see on the digital side is, it takes like a little bit too long to like get together in person. And, there's a lot of chatting that happened, not to get like full into dating app land, but so it's really helping that. I think pain point is like the first lens that we put everything through, for sure.
I guess just to follow up, being able to hone in on pain points, or, as Christine kind of framed it, like the right message or the right story that's going to resonate at the right time. Can you share a few? Are there any like tactical tips that you have? Like, how are you even approaching that? Like, how do you decide? Hopefully all of us as marketers have an awareness of what our buyers' pain points are, at least some of them, right? But how do you think about like, okay, how does that find its way into, or how does that manifest into an event program? Like, could you like do you have an example that you could share where it's like, this is a pain point. We did X, Y, or Z to determine that this was, the pain point or pain points we wanted to really focus on this quarter or next year. And then like, this is how we literally created the event program. I'm just curious because like, it sounds like there's a lot that would go into that, right? You probably need to, we talked a little bit about, and I saw a question from Danielle Glenn in the audience around aligning like your event strategy with like sales, right? Marketing and sales alignment, how that to me requires buy-in. And so like, my question for you is like, how do you, Christine, or you, Annie, you identify this need, right, for a new event program or a new event series? Where do you go from there in terms of making that a reality?
I think I'll let Christine probably tackle most of this, but it's highly cross-functional, right? Like you've got to start up at the top. And for me, it's really important to make sure that the event structure, cadence, locations, like all of that are playing into like the broader messaging structure for that market. So like, okay, if we're working on something in the US, what is the sort of Q4 like drumbeat there? And like, let's just ensure whether it's activating in the like markets that are the most important for us for growth, or what, it's really aligning. But then I think it's also, we have an in-house research team, and sort of our comms team has a really good pulse on stuff, just in terms of like feedback that we're hearing from users, but also then just sort of like broader trends, even less of like pain points, but more of insights on something as simple as what are the most common interest badges used. If you are not a Bumble user or dating app user, there's all these things that you can put in your profile that are sort of like, I'm a Gemini and a dog mom and I like to travel, right? Those are all true. How can we build on some of those insights to align with common interests that then just like serve up an even more like aforementioned, like really safe, really comfortable, cool way to sort of then organically match and connect and find someone that's interesting. So just like deep, intense cross-functional work, I think, and we're growing a lot. We've like in the last 18 months, we've like exponentially grown as a company. Like we're still quite small and young for this like publicly traded group. And there's been a lot of siloed work, like very transparently. I'm like on an island doing my thing, running, thousands of events, but I'm like, am I actually doing this the right way? Am I doing this in a way that is like driving back to business impact? So that is the true like 2024 goal, I think, is like getting everybody. We started using this phrase in an all hands offsite last week that was like, we're stacking hands, which like I had never heard like from a business perspective, but like imagine everybody like going in like, okay, ready, break, like sports analogy here. But we've really got to come together as like a business unit and build this stuff from the ground up. And I'm like, I can do anything. I can build any program. What do you want out of this? But like the business goal is the nut that we should start from. And so it might not be the 2022 or 2023 IRL version, may not be the 2024 goal. I think Christine, you sort of alluded to, like, you probably got some things changing. We as a people are different. Like the world is still, becoming different and changing, and behaviors and all of that as we've talked about. So what's the business goal? And like, you kind of have to let everything go, even if that is a tentpole that doesn't actually serve you, to be brave enough as a brand to say, all right, like Expo there isn't going to be a 2024 Expo because it actually just isn't the right thing. And being brave enough to like move away from what everybody's used to. And quite frankly, what's easier, right? Like, let's rinse and repeat this. I think we get in that a lot on the production side, because it's like, there's cost efficiency there. There's time efficiency there. There's the learned behavior of your audience. They're like, I know what to expect when I come in this door and I put my little badge on. And it's like, let's change it up. But that takes exponential more work. So it's brave. It's a brave choice to make.
I love how you framed that as brave. I think that is really the right word. I think you have to be brave and courageous to be doing the work that we're doing. And I appreciate you reminding us of that. Christine, I'm curious how you think about aligning your program goals with business goals. And yeah, just like how you're approaching that for next year.
I mean, plus 1,000 to everything Annie's saying. I feel all of that deeply. And I also just like sometimes wish like, can I just be a big ideas person? Then it's like, oh, right. We also have to like make sure it like matches all these other things. So like I sit under the marketing team and specifically corporate marketing. So I'm alongside, so it's events and production, it's content, it's social, it's community. So like all my peers, we're all like kind of working off the same, like what are our themes for the year? Where do they hit and when? But that's like the marketing side of it. Then there's sales and there's product. So we all have to be on that same roadmap of like, what product are we focusing on in this quarter? What is the sales cycle that we have to match with, and then has to run at this time to actually make a difference for them? And like a lot of that we are collaborating much more, I think, the second half of this year on like really building out a calendar together and trying to get ahead of things. I think a good example of like where things aligned really well, we launched a compensation product last year as part of our platform. And I'm sure I'm very much in the HR space, but you've probably heard about all the comp law changes in certain states, particularly at the beginning of this year. And we decided to launch a compensation conversations event series in January, ran all the way through April, where basically every month we would bring on an expert in the space to cover like a big topic. Because there's literally like HR teams where like, wait, what? We have to like figure all this out in the next month. Like, what do we do? It was just so top of mind, but it also was a product focus for us. So it was just like all this like perfect synergy. And that series like set all new records for us as far as the amount of attendance, amount of people that were like clicking through for demos, amount of people that were like going. We built out the whole on-demand page, and a lot of times on-demand like goes and lives and dies. You never see it again, but like people were attending live, going back to the previous 2 events that they hadn't seen. So it's really just having to like, it's hard, but you have to like plan out as much as you can with the business priority. So for us, that is what's on the product roadmap, what is the sales calendar, how can we best support them, and then digging deep in. And like our corporate marketing team has such a good pulse on what our audience cares about. From we're talking to customers the entire time, we're interviewing people to write content for them. That CPO council that I mentioned, I'm talking to them the whole time of like, what's top of mind for you? And honestly, even like at these in-person events, I'm like asking people like, okay, if we're going to do this again, what should we be talking about? Like I constantly have previous speakers like sending me like, oh, can you also do something on this? So just trying to be like really mindful of that. But it is a lot of like orchestrating all the different parties and getting us all on the same page.
I love it. Danielle, hopefully we answered some of your curiosity, your question around how to align sales and marketing strategy a bit. I want to be mindful of time. We've only got a few more minutes left, and there are a few questions I do want to ask both of you. We talked a little bit about proving value. Can you tell, I know it's going to be very different for each business, so audience members, keep that in mind. But and it not only is it different, like if you go from B2B to B2C events, but like we all talk about the metrics slightly differently. I've noticed like someone might call it like, pipe gen, and another might call it like sourced pipe. I don't know. So I'm just curious. I feel like we need to do like our own industry, like dictionary of like synonyms, like all of these different terms could mean these other things as well. But I would love for you to just talk a little bit, even if it's just 30 seconds, on how you think about measuring success and what are some of the key metrics that are really crucial for you to look at to prove the value of your programs and really show that impact to your business's bottom line. What are those metrics, and what are you looking at there? Christine, I'll start with you.
Okay. It definitely varies for each type of event and kind of what the main focus is. Because we do have some of them, they are like the pop-up trucks that I've mentioned a few times, that like big overall brand campaign. Yeah. We're not like trying to drive those like specific leads. Like that was a big brand play, awareness play. We saw a big social uptick. We did see a lot of people heading to our website, like specifically like big upticks when those events happened. But that was like clear-eyed, knowing like this is a big brand play. Mm-hmm. But when we're doing like very specific events around like I mentioned, the compensation conversations, digital event series that we did, we are looking like very much still care about like show rate. So like what's our registration, and then who actually attended, and like that's super important. We do care about how many people actually click through to get a demo, even though it's more thought leadership content. We do try to see, did people actually click through? Do we have the right type of people in the room to do that? But we are focused on like what leads does it drive, and like then really digging in like were they qualified leads. So that's like a big focus of ours. And like we are constantly like looking through a few months past an event of like, okay, how did that actually impact like new business, existing business? So a lot of like different metrics depending on the event, but we are very much like, okay, how did that perform? And every quarter, like, let's change it up. That didn't work that well. This really did and drove higher numbers. So it varies, but yeah, those numbers really matter.
Yeah, that was not intentionally a trick question, but yes. And I fully agree. I think like if I were asked that question, I'd say, well, it depends on the goal of the event or the program. And that's how then we determine the metrics and KPIs. Annie, I would love to just hear, as you're doing more like B2C work right now. So I'm just curious, like, what are, I'm sure you probably think in a similar way. It depends on the program, but what are, just name some metrics that you might look at to measure success in your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all wish, right, there was like a magic equation or like a secret sauce to this. I think as sort of like a lifer experiential person, career wise, it's sort of like the squishiest of them all. And like is when you think about other marketing channels. And for us specifically, like because we're not, collecting or qualifying leads, we're not even sampling, right? Like we're not a CPG or a beverage or a physical product. Like it's really hard to differentiate between a new download, a new registration from the other marketing channels that are likely active that potential user could be experiencing, right? So we actually developed, if you have Bumble, there is a unique QR code. We call it the B key because a lot of B motifs in our world, that we can scan at an event. We literally developed it to be able to attribute like a net new download or registration to a specific event, time, place, etc. So by scanning that B key, we can learn basically how long your profile's been active. So is it 5 minutes from time of scan or is it 5 years? So then you can sort of like double into all of that information, like, oh, Annie's been active for 5 years. She comes to like X number of events a month, blah, blah, blah. It just like tells you a little bit more about that person and sort of like our event audience, but was explicitly like created to share, or uh give the success of that download to a specific event, which I think is super helpful if you are working in a digital commodity that doesn't have something like leads or an intent to trial. I think something like that is really helpful. But I think there is a lot to be said from just like trying to measure consumer sentiment on site. That's our job as experiential leads and strategists, is like we're a storyteller. And it's our job to share like how did we actually make that person feel. I think that can lead to solve for some other like KPIs and objectives that then you can like really like nail into. But it's our job as the owner of that metric to like tell the story of like why this mattered. It is so much more of a, if you really want to like business term it, but like a qualified lead or like a happy user, that they like come and spend time with you. To like for someone in their like normal life to say it's like the ultimate opt-in marketing channel, right? Like I had this explained to me once as like a very young field coordinator, that it's like legacy media is typically opt out, right? Change the channel, turn the page of the magazine, unsubscribe from the email list. Experientials opt in. You're walking down the street, you're at a conference, like you see Christine's like bomb ass coffee truck. You got a notification about a happy hour that Bumble's throwing. You're making that choice to opt in. So that person is already way more beneficial and like powerful to you as a brand to convert them to a power user or a new client or whatever it is. And that is on us as like the storyteller internally, because all the other marketers that we likely all, sit next to live in like a land of like Nielsen ratings or, conversion of clicks. And this is what this is. This is people being their own selves. Now, can you 100% control if that person walks away like pissed off, satisfied, whatever? You can't, because again, they're humans and everyone is going to go do their thing. But I think if you do your best to design and plan for like optimal experiences, you've got a really great customer service engagement on like the back half of something if something goes wrong. And it's really human. It's the most like human way to market, and it's how people actually want to be marketed to, especially like a millennial, especially a Gen Z generation. This is actually what's expected. But it's hard and it's expensive, and like I said, it's really squishy. So I think getting your peers and your stakeholders internally on board of like, hey, we're going to tell you a story. We're going to let you know how we sort of like checked in with everybody. And that's on you. Unfortunately, it's on us, not on you. We're a collective here. And using tools literally like Splash, not a plug. They didn't ask me to do this, but it's like, what are all the things that you can like spit out some numbers that then like give your story a little more footing? Because I think it's super important, and vocalizing to your organization, like if we're going to take the time to invest in the people internally to put all these things on, and then the money to actually produce stuff, we need to understand that this is a characteristic of this channel.
Yeah.
And it's not, experiential is not the right thing for every brand and every product at all times. And I'm the first person to say that. I'm like, let's like pull this back. It's not about like my own job security. It's like what's best for the brand. Unless you're like Red Bull, Mountain Dew, some of these like Vans, these like wildly edgy brands that never have anything to lose and only things to gain from being out in the wild. It's you don't light it up every time. It's not like that's why paid media exists, right?
Mhm.
So it's like really thinking through strategically what are the moments to show up, and then getting the buy-in from the people around you to support that.
Oh my goodness. Preach. I appreciate you both so much. We're at time, so I want to thank you both. I know, Annie, you need to drop, so if you need to hop off stage, you can. Christine, Annie, thank you so very much. Your insights that you shared today are truly invaluable, and as I said, I'm personally eager to take some notes back to our team and incorporate some of the things that you've talked about today. Before we wrap, I have to announce our social raffle winner and say congratulations to Cynthia Compton. You have won our $50 Take Care gift card today, so we'll be in touch to get that to you. And to everyone else in the audience, on behalf of the entire Splash team, thank you so much for joining us today. I've got just one final announcement. I hope you will save the date for January 23rd. We're hosting Go All In on Attendance with AI. So I want you to think about, what if event attendance wasn't a roll of the dice? Join us to get a first look at Attendance Insights, the event industry's first predictive AI solution. It's all going down January 23rd. I hope you join us live. And thank you so much for joining us today. If you found this session valuable, please let us know. We live for creating opportunities for marketing and event professionals like you to learn with us. So we will drop a feedback survey link in the event chat. It'll also go out in an email to you. Please let us know what you thought of today. And last but not least, as I said, if you're interested in learning more about how Splash can support you on your journey of unlocking event-led growth for your organization, like we have for Christine and Annie, let us know. You can book a one-on-one demo with us, join Meet Splash, or just reach out to me personally. Be happy to chat one-on-one if you have any questions. All right. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for rocking with us. And until next time, take care, y'all.